Johnny Cash did not hit bottom on a stage. He did not hit bottom in a jail cell. He did not even hit bottom in front of the public. He hit bottom alone, in the dark, deep inside a cave in Tennessee, convinced he was ready to die. That sounds like legend now. But for Johnny Cash, it was not legend. It was exhaustion. It was addiction. It was the moment when a man who had built his life around motion finally ran out of road. By the mid-1960s, Johnny Cash was in serious trouble. The fame was real. The records were real. The crowds were real. But so were the pills. Amphetamines had become part of his working life. At first, they kept him moving. They helped him survive the endless miles, the late shows, the early mornings, the constant pressure to stay sharp and stay on the road. Then they stopped helping and started taking over. Cash was losing weight, losing sleep, losing judgment, losing control. There were arrests, canceled appearances, broken promises, long stretches of chaos that even people close to him could not fully manage. His marriage was failing. His body was failing. And underneath everything else, his sense of himself was beginning to fail too. Johnny Cash had always carried darkness in his songs. But now the darkness was no longer something he shaped into music. It was shaping him. He later wrote and spoke about this period with unusual honesty. He did not describe it like a romantic outlaw story. He described it like a man who knew he had gone too far and did not know how to find the way back. That is what makes the cave matter. Because by the time he entered it, he was not looking for adventure. He was not looking for inspiration. He was not even looking for a dramatic moment he could someday turn into a story. He was looking for an end. The cave was Nickajack Cave in Tennessee. Cash knew caves. He had explored them before. He liked the silence, the separation, the feeling of stepping outside ordinary life. But this time was different. He entered that cave with the specific intention of not fighting to come back out. He was tired of the pills, tired of failing people, tired of disappointing himself, tired of being Johnny Cash in public and something unraveling in private. And once he moved deep enough into the cave, the darkness did what true darkness does. It stripped everything away. Inside the cave, Johnny Cash lost his sense of direction. That part is important. Because the story is not that he walked into the dark and immediately found God. The story is that he walked into the dark and got exactly what he had been moving toward for years. Isolation. Silence. No audience. No applause. No pills left to carry him any further. Just him, his body, and the knowledge that he did not care anymore whether he got out. Later, Cash said he had gone there to die. Not in some dramatic, symbolic sense. Literally. He was ready to let the cave take him. But in that darkness, something shifted. Not all at once. Not like a movie. Not like a lightning bolt. More like surrender. Cash would later describe it in spiritual terms. He believed God was there. He believed he was being told, in the only way he could hear it at that point, that his life was not finished yet. That did not mean he suddenly became healthy. It did not mean the addiction vanished in one holy instant. That is where a lot of retellings flatten the truth. The cave was not a magic cure. It was a turning point. Johnny Cash still had to come out of that cave and live in the world again. He still had to face the damage. He still had to keep failing and trying and failing again. But the cave was the moment when he stopped moving toward death and allowed himself, however reluctantly, to move back toward life. And that is where June Carter matters. Because Johnny Cash did not rescue himself alone. People love stories where one man walks into darkness and comes back reborn by his own strength. This is not that story. Johnny Cash had strength, but he also needed people. June Carter was one of the most important of them. She had known him in his best moments and his worst ones. She could see the brilliance and the wreckage at the same time. And unlike many people around a famous man in crisis, she was not impressed by the mythology of his suffering. She loved him, but she did not romanticize what was happening to him. She understood that if Johnny Cash was going to live, he needed more than admiration. He needed truth. He needed boundaries. He needed faith. He needed people who would stay, but not lie to him. The Carter family became part of that lifeline. So did his own sense, newly shaken awake in that cave, that maybe he had not been preserved for comfort. Maybe he had been preserved for purpose. That is a different kind of survival. And for Johnny Cash, it changed everything that came after. The months after the cave were not instantly clean or simple. That matters too. Because real recoveries are rarely neat. Cash still struggled. He still fought the habits and impulses that had nearly killed him. He still had to rebuild trust with the people who loved him. But something in him had changed. The direction had changed. He was no longer drifting deeper into destruction without resistance. Now there was resistance. Now there was a future to protect. And soon there was June. In February 1968, not long after that dark season, Johnny Cash proposed to June Carter on stage in London, Ontario. It was public, emotional, and unforgettable. But the proposal only makes full sense if you understand what came before it. This was not just a star making a grand romantic gesture. It was a man who had nearly lost himself trying, finally, to choose life in front of other people. Later that same year came another defining moment: Folsom Prison. And this is where the story becomes even more powerful. Because the man who walked into Folsom in 1968 was not the same man who had walked into Nickajack Cave ready to disappear. He was still complicated, still wounded, still restless, still fully Johnny Cash. But he was no longer surrendering to the dark in the same way. At Folsom, the darkness in his songs had purpose. It had discipline. It had compassion. It had form. That is why the cave matters, even if many casual fans never hear about it. It helps explain the version of Johnny Cash the world came to trust. The man in black was never just a style choice. It was a moral image. A spiritual one, too. Cash had looked directly at ruin. Not in a lyric, not in a film, in himself. And when he came back from that edge, his voice carried something it could not have carried otherwise. That is why older recordings sound different after you know this story. The gravity was earned. The tenderness was earned. Even the sternness was earned. Johnny Cash walked into that cave because he believed there was nothing left worth saving. He came out because, somewhere in the dark, he understood that his life still belonged to something beyond his despair. Maybe to God. Maybe to love. Maybe to duty. Maybe to the songs he had not sung yet. Probably to all of them. That is the reason this chapter of his life still reaches people now. Not because it is sensational, because it is recognizably human. A man breaks. A man disappears into the dark. A man decides, somehow, to come back. And when he does not come back perfect. He comes back changed. Johnny Cash walked into a cave ready to die. He came out with the first real chance to live differently. And without that moment, there may be no great comeback, no deeper faith, no Folsom as we remember it, and no lasting image of Johnny Cash as the man who could stand in darkness without belonging entirely to it. That is why the cave changed him forever.